Welcome, everybody. It is day 3 of our Earth Day virtual summit weekend. It is going by so fast, and there have been so many amazing presenters. And today I am so honored and thrilled to welcome Krishna Madappa. He's coming to us from halfway around the world right now, and he has an amazing, amazing lecture to share with us on the nectar of insightful transmissions. So without further ado, I'm just going to pass it right over to you, Krishna.
Super. You know, since we all gather in Taos and live in Taos, here we are very synchronous to the knowing that we are all frequency and vibration. You know, but so when we understand that, then we are also very sensitive to the nature of how these frequency vibration patterns continue to pattern themselves, how they begin to flow. And all of this, we are able to observe because we influence our space, we influence our environment. So this is an area that I have been deep dive into for almost last 20 years. And we've done many projects on a global initiative with filmmakers from Israel. One particular film, it's called The One Field. Maybe you've come across it. And it began about almost 4 years ago. And the intention over here is, if the thoughts we think is the world we create, can we measure it? And if we can measure it, what are we going to see? So that began our early investigations. And then, have you heard of Lynn McTaggart? Alana, have you heard of Lynn McTaggart?
Yes, I've heard.
Okay, so Lynn is very much part of our team because she has been initiating many global initiatives like this. So what we did was my colleague in Russia, then myself over here in Bangalore, and then we had some other colleagues in the Middle East. And to me, I was measuring the influence of thought and how water would respond to it. See how water would respond. So we did one experiment, and then we shared that one experiment. Then the lady who is the producer director of the One Field, her name is Sipi, T-S-I-P-I. So she decided that we take this and really up the ante not only from the perspective of observing the influence of intention to water, but also can we measure the influence of blood? So if these folks are sitting, one group is in Jerusalem, another group is in England, another group is here in Bangalore as an example, and we set collective intention for the well-being of all humankind. Will the blood respond? So John Reed is one of our colleagues who has been involved in these projects, and John Reed is very much a doyen in the areas of cymatics. And cymatics is a field of information patterns. So because our cells communicate by frequency waves, so they are actually communicating at very high infrared waves. So when we set intention, so let us say, for instance, you take the tip of your tongue to your upper mandible and you take a breath in and you go, and you do that a few times, you are actually stimulating a lot of nitrous oxide. So this is a direct boost to the immune system. So we are able to then clearly begin to define that what's the toolbox that the human can have, that ultimately one could be able to utilize them no matter what the circumstances are in life, where you can tap into. So that became the focal point for the presentation, or for what I would like to share today, is that the overarching intent is that the way I was also taught as a young kid, and this is directly from the lineages of sages, and to this day it still works. It's still very present, because what is undiluted is clarity. Truth is undiluted. Truth. So can we then integrate these holistic practices, so these overarching practices, so that we are able to up the bar within us, and by upping the bar within us, there is never a moment where we would feel downtrodden. Well, if it does happen, we have the strength to be able to seek to recalibrate. And this has always been the basis of the science of human transformation. I would take it one step further. I would call it the science, the spirit, and the soul of human transformation. Because we bring together a complete integration of who we are, who is this system, in relationship to our physical environment, who is this person in relationship to deeper level of thoughts, and who is this person when we go into the deeper level of what we term as stillness. So I've made a few very simple little sheets like that can be very simple in terms of entry points for everyone, and applying them is ultimately the takeaway. Applying them is the takeaway, and applying them with no expectation. And how often do we do what we do without any expectation? It's a question. Right? I mean,
yeah, not often, right? There's so many expectations.
So can we do what we do devoid of expectation, but rather always connecting to what we would call the high vision? Because when humankind attains a high vision, the lower vision disappears unto itself. Then multitude count for naught. It takes a few beings with infinite energy, infinite enthusiasm, infinite courage, infinite patience, and infinite love. And such beings can do more in a year than an entire mob in a century. And this has always been the foundation to I'll call it a evolved way of living. When I say evolved way of living, is that I will now come to this aspect about the golden quadrilateral, because this will begin to summarize exactly what that means and how this in turn can be blended, applied in every walk of life to everyone, so that one can thrive, one can flourish without having to do anything. So, have you heard this term before? You want to read it aloud?
Do nothing, accomplish everything. I love that. Wow.
Right? Recite it 2 more times, please. And maybe everyone should do that.
Do nothing, accomplish everything. Do nothing, accomplish everything.
So, have you heard this term before? Either one of you?
Not exactly in those words, but I love it. I love it.
So, translated, everything comes right to the focal point when we still the mind. When we still the mind, then the universe opens. But to still the mind is a work in progress. And that's what I mean by the golden quadrilateral. So we'll start from here, this one. So it starts from here, unconscious incompetence. And I'll go through examples as we navigate in these 4 quadrants. So from unconscious incompetence, we come to conscious incompetence, and then we go to conscious competence, and finally we come to unconscious competence. So here's a beautiful take home. We all know how to drive a car, right, at some given point. So before we got it, and let's say the Tesla is not yet familiar with a lot of people because of the way the platform is. So you begin with a certain pattern of a unconscious incompetence. And so with this unconscious incompetence, you, by pattern and use, you create a conscious incompetence, which means you're aware that you have also made certain errors. The more you dig into it, you begin to touch this space, which is conscious competence, meaning you have begun to create a sense of mastery in the way you do what you do. And once you've created that level of mastery, you naturally gravitate towards unconscious competence, which means that it comes very naturally to you, right? It comes totally naturally to you, and hence the ability for us to up the bar in every facet of what we do will happen. But to get to this spot, using these 4 quadrants, starting from here, to here, to here, and then to here. This is an age-old exercise. And this age-old exercise is entrainment of mind. You know what this is? The forefinger with a dot. And this is taught to every young person once upon a time in, I would say, the India where they held the quality of life at the highest moral fabric and base. So this dot, you place this dot about 18 inches to 2 feet in front of you, like that. And you focus both your eyes like a laser beam. They go and they hone in to the dot. Right? They go in and hone into the dot. Then you close your eyes. And after you've closed your eyes, now you'll see the dot. Now move the dot up, move the dot down, move the dot sideways to the left, move the dots sideways to the right. Well, then also give it a rotational. And for any reason that doesn't, and the mind field is a little on the wavy side, that's perfectly okay. Come back to its starting point. So when you come back to its starting point, you do the same thing over again till you have attained that level of mastery. So from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence to conscious competence and unconscious competence. Because at that space, finally, at unconscious competence, you've arrived, which means that you pretty much can close your eyes and you can tune right in with no hesitation at all. Why? Because you have entrained the mind. We are talking about mind entrainment. And the mind entrainment is done in this manner. Let me just cite some examples for all of us gathered together across maybe Taos, parts of the world, maybe across the entire universe. I think I would probably take the clock maybe about 16, 17 years ago in Taos while I was there. I had a young man who came to visit with me. He was a teenager, but you could see that he was very troubled, very troubled. And that time I used to, on every Sunday, I used to hold what we call today a satsang. And you know what a satsang is, right? So during the course of the satsang, this was one of the definite exercises. And he did that. And then he reached out to me because he lived between San Francisco and Taos. And he said, every time I come to Taos, can I come and dedicate quality time with you? I told him, certainly. So we did this, the entrainment process. We went through the golden quadrilateral. In 2 years, after he kept practicing and he was very diligent in what he did, he was selected to the Junior Baseball League. See, that is again the capacity for entrainment, which means that you can tune right in to a higher order of action, into a higher order of alignment. So this is one such example. It has also occurred with folks who did this exercise and ended up becoming bestsellers and writing books that were bestsellers. All over the last, I would say, 15, 18 years. And ultimately, the moment we can tap into that core power is what I call the nature of the quantum mind. We've all heard that term before, right? The nature of the quantum mind. But what does it mean, the nature of the quantum mind? The quantum mind will never get to experience itself till it touches stillness. When it touches stillness, we get to be imbued with a quality that we don't need to talk about. It begins to ripple. It begins to show. It begins to reveal itself. Because these principles hold. Unconscious incompetence happens. Conscious incompetence is the next stage. From there, we come to conscious competence. And this is all by repetition. You take pilots, airline pilots, you can apply this right there. You can apply this in just about any scenario. You're the CEO of a company, you run a business. You can begin to apply these principles. And what ultimately is the take home from here is that you empower everyone who comes into your space. And that empowering of everyone into the space raises the collective bar, because that raising of the collective bar is what we term as the unified field. You've heard that term before, right? Alana?
Yeah.
The unified field of natural law.
Wow.
So that is the deep space in which we all begin to interface in. So this is our new normal. But to get to that new normal, it starts with this empowerment. And the moment we are able to spot, without even having to put a dot, we can get a dot, we can move it up, move it down with the eyes closed, and very soon this becomes such an integral part of you. And one would be simply in a space to realize, wow, we humans are truly not limited in few dimensions. We are multi-dimensional beings. And this is how all the great teachers have always seen this. But to understand and touch that space of the multi-dimensional pattern, we approach what we call the nature of the quantum mind. So here you see at the bottom, UF is the unified field. Atma is soul in Sanskrit. And the state of para is the state of deep, deep stillness. You've heard this sutra of a deep Tibetan sutra, Gate, Gate, para samgate, bodhiswaha. Gone beyond the senses, gone beyond thought, gone beyond the thought of thoughts. Hail to those who have illumined these pathways so that we may carry this beacon for the benefit of all life ad infinitum. That's education. That's education for enlightenment. Because education should always be for enlightenment, shouldn't it? So all our connects begin to steer themselves in this manner. Why? Because we now begin to really, really clearly observe from where we started as unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and unconscious competence. And so here's an example. Let's take pilots. Fly these big planes across. Right? When they first began, they are finding their way. With years with practice, they begin to develop a conscious level of incompetence because they are still now the navigator alongside sitting with the captain. So they get to see what the captain does. And very soon, the captain passes on the reins to the navigator and said, yep, here you go, take it on. Now, all of a sudden, this person, him or her, is thrust into this. Now, the moment you get thrust into this process, the next thing that happens is you create a wave, and that wave creates the unconscious competence, which means that instantaneously, the moment you go in, sit in the cockpit, you know exactly what to do. Right? That's unconscious competence. This particular chart is used by CEOs across the world. It is used by business leaders in various parts of the world. And what this also does is raises the bar so that one can create a refinement of life while you are here, which is what we call the supramental mind. So I'll come back to this chart. The nature of the quantum mind. Have you heard of Sri Aurobindo?
I haven't heard of him.
Maybe not.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard of him.
Okay. Sri Aurobindo was a person of French descent and lived in India during the 1920s. And and has an entire community called Auroville, which you may have heard of, a totally, completely ecological community. Back then, this is way back in the 1920s, you know, to be living totally off the grid, self-sustained, with your plants, like what they did at Findhorn, spoke to the plants, sang to the plants, sang to the soil, no chemicals, no pesticides, none of that. And the veggies, the fruits were abundant, right? Were abundant. Today we understand this from, again, this principle. At that time, we really didn't pay that much attention. But now, if the thoughts we think is the world we create, then let's think high thoughts. Let's think of them day after day, moment after moment. If you stumble and fall, it doesn't matter. Pick yourself back up, but keep the high vision in front of you. So Sri Aurobindo, in one of his contemplations, said that applies even more so today. He said, for humanity to raise the bar of life, we must look at the ignorance of mind, ignorance of matter, ignorance of life, transform it, and create a brilliant life here. Now, Isn't that a worthwhile take home?
Definitely. Definitely. Wow.
See? So these are the foundational principles. And these foundational principles do not take effort. That's the whole thing. You know, when we think about doing a particular exercise, we talk about yoga, whether it is yoga, whether it is any kind of calisthenics. There is always an output, energetic output, which we term as entropy. So entropy can be both affirmative entropy or not affirmative entropy. If it is affirmative entropy, we call it neg entropy, which means that we are doing things as seamless as possible with minimal amount of exertion of energy. Minimum amount of exertion of energy, which is what Qigong masters do. You know how Qigong masters can move, they can weave and be able to draw a huge quanta of energy, draw that in and channel it particularly to particular areas within the system, which we all know because we've all been around the block. But now it is to apply them, no? And even more so, even more so, because these are times that have caused great deal of uncertainty in life, a tremendous amount of uncertainty in life. And this uncertainty has created a state of disbalance in many beautiful souls across the world. So what does it ultimately take? You know, what is the greatest power? What is the greatest power of the force of all the universe? It's love. That is the most powerful force of all the universe. But to live in that space, one has to have a tremendous amount of fortitude. Tremendous amount of fortitude. And to have that kind of fortitude, we literally have to have the warrior within us, the inner warrior within us, raise its hood. But to raise its hood, how do we begin? So this dot takes us, and when you use that dot, you're also using it and you are breathing that dot in. You're always being synchronized with your breathing cycle. So when you are synchronized with your breathing cycle, it touches a deep space. And this is the most important aspect of this particular chart. This chart is a gold mine for Vedic understanding. If there is a secret in the Vedas, this is it, right here. This evokes inside of you, transforming from body of matter to body of light. And these are not words, because you sense it. Our cells, as we know, are governed in light. Our cells, as we know, are governed in water, air, water, and light. So we come to this still space, which we call Atma, or the unified field. Actually, a Nobel was awarded many years ago to an ultra-weak unified theory. John Hagelin, a wonderful physicist, was very much involved in creating the deep insights. And this particular chart is the chart of deep Vedic transmission. This is the depth of Vedic transmission. So Atma is the soul. State of para that we covered earlier is the state of void, the state of emptiness. When there is that empty space, you are the universe, is it not? But the moment you puncture through, that, you come across the first portion here, which is called Pashyanti. Pashyanti is the first perturbation because the wave begins. At this space, at the Atma space, everything is still. Total stillness. The moment you puncture that stillness, you've created a vibration. As this vibration, as waves begin to amplify, that reaches a crest, as you can see here, and little bubbles begin. And these bubbles, so we have here what we call Pashyanti, Madhyama, Vaikari. Pashyanti is the moment I have punctured stillness, I create a wave. How elegant, isn't it? Especially when we are able to see it. So that puncturing of stillness creates this, which is what we call the quantum nature of the mind. This is still the quantum mind, which is why we have QM. But the moment we threshold beyond that space, like right there, and now you've got the little bubbles that begin to start to unfurl, you create what we call the classical model. And the classical model is over here, we call Madhyama, which is in the middle, and Vaikari, which is at the top. So Madhyama being at the middle is you're going through and deeply analyzing what is being observed. Deeply analyzing what is being observed. And when you come to the top, so when the bubble comes and it filters into the top membrane surface, so imagine the top membrane surface as the nature of mind, which is the nature of the quantum mind. So the moment the bubble comes and it pops, it sends a perturbation, doesn't it? But if we stay in that perturbed space, will we ever know what this is? So this becomes the great learning to any student in terms of understanding the quantum nature of the mind. And see how simple it is. And it's achievable by everyone. How many of us say, oh, my mind is so scattered, how can I control it? The fact is you don't want to control it. That's the whole thing. The moment we look at controlling the mind, well, you've got push-pull factors occurring all the time. But the moment we are able to observe it from its Gestalt perspective, which means a holism, then it no longer has the effect to dilute the power, which ultimately would be to the recipient. And we are all the recipients. This is a practice. This is a fundamental practice that has brought forth beings like, do you know a person by the name of Srinivasa Ramanujan? A mathematician back in the 1920s, 1930s, during the time when the British were here. He began to solve complex problems, and he was a postman. right? He was a postman, and he began to solve these complex uh, forms, complex forms. I mean, all in various types of integrations, mathematical integrations. And then the British decided they wanted him to go. So they shipped him to Cambridge. And there, of course, he doesn't eat meat. So he had a tough time trying to make do with the food that he had. So one fine day during a classroom session, and these guys, all these mathematician professors, were racking their brains and racking their brains, and Ramanujam comes up and he just goes, fat, fat, tat, 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 done. And these guys look at each other and they said, it's impossible. How do you get this? Oh, I just get it. Now, how do you explain that? I just get it. See, this comes when you touch that space right there. This comes when you hone in instantaneously. This comes when you live this principle. So, we are definitely at a very important threshold of life. Very, very important threshold of life. And the threshold of life is to really have everyone be empowered. It's important because we have created a highly distorted approach to the way we view life. And that doesn't bode well. That doesn't bode well because there is more noise on the outside. There's more noise on the outside, which is what this is all about. How can you touch stillness? Makes sense, no?
Definitely does. Wow.
Yeah. So we see that a majority of humanity is thresholding somewhere between this point here and that point there. Very seldom does one go deeper. If you start to go deeper, you're challenging the very architecture of what we all stand for. And nature seeks a unified field. Nature seeks to have a unified field thrive for everyone. Everyone. There should be no exception. So, do we go through various cycles? Yeah, we go through various cycles. I want to share something. When my daughter Ariana, she was in 7th standard and there was a school at that time called the Acacia School, and every parent had 1 semester to share at the school, 1 semester. At that time, my travels were not as it began over 10, 15 years ago. So during one such, I showed them a film, a documentary called Fractals, the Colors of Infinity. Have you seen it?
No, but I want to.
Oh, Alana, you got to get it. It's on YouTube. So I used to show the students at the school this film. And of course, it's got a lot. I mean, what do you expect? 6th graders, 7th graders, 8th graders. You got nice trippy pictures. We are Taos, right? so all this coming along, and then there's a small little Q&A, and then the following week, I tell them, okay, now let's just review what you all saw, and now let's go out into the field and see how nature self-organizes itself. Because nature is a fractal universe. It's never not been a fractal universe. So, please to round everybody up and go down on the road towards Angel Fire. You remember there's a acequia on the right-hand side. That nice fresh water used to pour out from there. So we go and we stop at that place, and then we look at what's the kind of vegetation that we see around this lovely body of fresh artesian water. And we see watercress, lush watercress, right? So now then we look at the watercress and we look at the nature of how the watercress is growing as a tribe. Because what thrives when there is a sense of unification? And in physics, we have a term for that. We call it this particular chart. When we come down to the bottom, all this at the top, we call these the diversified fluctuations of a unified field of natural law. So nature constantly aligns you to that. Nature constantly aligns you. All we have to do is take off a thinking hat and just be able to observe. Just observe. How often? This is an exercise which we used to always have during our sessions across in various parts of the world, is that I will have the harmonic, I'll have the harmonic of a gong like this, and I'll play the harmonic of a gong. And have everyone just close their eyes and sense the harmonic completely into one. Oh, and the moment we do that, there is a natural alignment to order and elegance that begins to occur. Natural order. See, so conflict is almost gone. We become solution driven always. If there is an area that we may not meet eye to eye, we always seek to refine it by solutions. And if nothing is obtained, then let's keep it to the next wave. But always driven towards solutions. So don't you think that deserves a toast? So, I know, would you like to have a small Q&A, Alana?
Yeah, I think that would be great. Anybody that's watching live on the Zoom right now that has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or type it in the chat.
Lovely, lovely.
I have a question. So I love the entrainment with the finger. I've never actually done that particular exercise, but I guess what would be a recommendation around like using that as a daily practice, or how often, or what would your recommendation of like integrating this into daily life look like?
You mean the dot?
The dot, or all of these concepts, like what's the best way to start doing that in daily life? Like,
yeah, it's also very helpful that there is a roadmap that you create. not random. So at each point, you are actually monitoring your brain waves. You're monitoring the level of adaptation in the system. And so to ultimately, what is it that you wish to seek accomplished from here? So if it is the aspect related, the golden quadrilateral as an example, this is an overarching. I mean, this is the overarching picture. This is your game for life. So it can be applied in just about every scenario and to all beings in all spaces and ultimately all dimensions. And this, the depth of what this means, do nothing, accomplish everything, one can only touch that space the moment we have expanded what we call the supramental mind. See, the supramental mind is what Sri Aurobindo said. To achieve the supramental mind, we need to look at the ignorance of mind, matter, life, transform it, and create a brilliant life here. What a clear statement, isn't it? That will hold across legacies. The moment we are able to see the ignorance of mind, ignorance of matter, ignorance of life, and then we see, can we in turn, how can we begin to refine it? Let's not think we are ever going to change anything. No, but never underestimate the power of one. It takes one drop, because that one drop, when it has all the ingredients in it, it can influence a large body. And today, we are witnessing this in my water research. So we are definitely at a higher bar, Alana, Patty, in terms of where we are thresholding and ultimately empowering of a community, empowering first of individual. And without the due diligence, there are nothing to spoon feed. Everything, every facet, just like a spider. Just like a spider, it builds a web, and then as it's completed its web, a big wind comes along and knocks the web down. Well, what does the spider do? It goes back and builds it again. Right? And as it builds it again, another strong wind comes and knocks the whole thing down. And this was the story of Robert Bruce. He was an Scottish nobleman. It's a very interesting story. How a spider influenced him, because one day he is back in his castle and his entire staff say to him, "Sir, our granaries are empty, our treasury is bereft, we don't know what to do, we have to leave." He's never faced such a situation, and he just gets out of the castle and runs and runs and runs and runs till he reaches the outskirts of the forest, and there he just, out of exhaustion, he's flat out. When he opens his eyes, it is now dusk, and he sees the spider building, and then the wind. And he does this 7 times, and the spider does not relent. What a powerful story, isn't it? So there is also a saying, the closer we are to nature, the closer we are to source.
Oh, I love that so much. The closer we are to nature, the closer we are to source. Thank you. Wow, what a perfect way. Yeah, cheers. Let's raise our cup to that. Wow, what a beautiful, beautiful offering. Thank you so much, Krishna. There's like so many nuggets of wisdom in there that I'm going to take forward, and super grateful for you being here with us today. And yeah, have a wonderful evening, because it's evening for you there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Well,
Lovely.
again, this was a part of our Earth Day summit and fundraiser for the High Frequency Loft. So if you enjoyed this, please consider donating to our fundraiser. And thank you so much, Krishna. I would love to have you back another time to do another workshop. This was just
Wishing you the best of the best in the next 2 days.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
To
Wonderful.
all of you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Indeed. Here, let's do a resonance of the gong.
Oh, yes.
So take a moment and just sort of softly, deeply breathe. Aho.
Aho. Wow, that was so beautiful.
Oh,
I love it. Thank you so much. This was
thank you, Krishna.
This was so
Most welcome. Blessings to you all.
Blessings to you. Thank you.
Okay.